So guys, what if Naruto was hidden empire and the ruler of darkness? The memories flowed for him like all the others had, and he felt it deep in his bones as they led him down the corridor in chains around his wrists as he could only remember the events that led to this event. It all started with his first memory of what had happened to lead to this current situation. That first event had been the invasion of the Hidden Leaf Village. It was during these events that the Snake Sage had successfully resurrected the first and second Hokages, but also the fourth Hokage and his wife as well. And while the first and second Hokage had been sent back to the afterlife, the snake had made a mistake in bringing back to life the fourth Hokage and his wife, as they had made a great sacrifice with their family to stop the Nine-Tails Fox many years ago, which had granted them their right to live again once more. Naruto was surprised to find the one who had condemned him to this lonely life had returned. However, it was the realization that they had had a daughter hidden away safely that had truly enraged him so much that he felt used and betrayed. His resentment only grew over time as this young girl was even more favored than before, and he found his one-time hero demanding more of him. But the worst had yet to come as the retrieval mission that had cost him his place in the village as well as his dream. Just as then and now he was being legged down this corridor once more and remembered what he had been told, that this punishment would teach him a lesson and that when he returned much would be revealed to him, but now he needed to be humbled and his rage cooled. Very few people understand what he had truly been through. This was a decision that would set a new course in history in motion and the creation of the Empire of Balance that he would lead as emperor. But this was another story altogether for another time to tell. But for now he would go to pay his respects to the Fall who have shaped his life, and it led to this encounter as the doors are thrown open and he's brought in before the man who made him a sacrifice in the first place. A day earlier, Jiraiya had just finished giving his report on the whereabouts of one Naruto Uzumaki's whereabouts, as they had been looking for him for close to a decade. The fourth Hokage sat behind his desk reading every piece of information and smiled as he turned to one of his personal assistants and spoke. Prepare my best Anbu operatives for action. We are going to capture him and bring him back here, and he's going to tell us why he did not come back all these years. Jiraiya shook his head at his old student, now the village leader, and walked over to him and spoke. It might be a good idea, just let him go, Minato. I have no intention of letting him go, sensei, Minato said. The old pervert, as some had called him, let out a sigh as he then said, have you even read all of the report? Of course I have, he said, and you want a chance of making the Empire of Balance an enemy? It will not come to that, we just get him and get out without anyone being the wiser, he says to himself and sure of the plan. Jiraiya cannot help but feel dread as he then looks his old student in the eyes and says, there's greatness in you, Minato, but there's not an ounce of humility. You think you can't make mistakes, but there's going to come a moment when you realize you're wrong about that, and you're going to get yourself and everyone under your command killed. Is that what you want? Minato thought about it for a few seconds and then said, it will not come to that, you know. I hope you're right, but don't expect me to hold my breath either. Naruto stood with a large number of his personal guards known as the Nightshades, who wore jet black armor and the blue symbol of his former homeland Whirlpool upon their armor. He had been on wave for nearly 2 days and still had not visited the graves of the two people who had shown him true courage despite some of their more questionable actions in the past. They had shown him kindness even though they were enemies at that time. But because it was possible for his former home to find him, for the lack of a better word, was frightening and annoying as they had thrown him away. He needed to take precautions and put a tracking device upon his wrist that looked like a simple piece of jewelry, and nodded to his guard to tell Akima where he was headed and that he would single if he was in trouble. With a solemn heart he made his way up to the cliff where the graves overlooked not only the great sea but also the setting sun. It was a fitting resting place for anyone. Next he was greeted by the small set of flowers which he then picked and placed upon them as he then spoke. Zabuza. Haku, I know it's been a very long time since I last stood here and talked to you too. The fact was, last time was when I went to the west and started what I initially finished. So much has happened, wherever do I even start? Naruto racked his brain thinking of where to start when he felt their presence and simply muttered, oh shit. He then rose to his full height and turned around only to be greeted by a half-dozen of the Hidden Leaf's Anbu, who were at this time surrounding him in a combat formation, leaving him no possible escape route. And while this was bad enough, to hear the footsteps of someone else made him turn and let out a small growl as the fourth Hokage came into view. The minute Minato laid eyes on his elusive prize, he swore that if looks could kill, he would have been not only back to the land of the dead but boiling repeatedly in the pits of hell over and over again. He then walked forward with several of his Anbu and placed the restraints upon him, and then activated to seal, sending them all back to the Hidden Leaf. What none of the Anbu had seen was the image of several of the Night Shadow Troopers hiding in the background. One of them then Alfat's communicator and made a call, Lady Akima. The image of a young woman with Mandalorian armor appeared before him and spoke, yes soldier, what is it? My lady, we regret to inform you that the Emperor has been taken by Leaf Anbu and what appeared to be the fourth Hokage. We could not safely engage them without risking the Emperor. What we do? The young woman quickly activated the controls upon her wrist and showed the tracking signal that he had activated appearing somewhere in Hidden Leaf Village. She then began to bark out orders, knowing that they had to move fast if they were going to save him from whatever the Hidden Leaf had planned. Naruto was walked down a corridor of the Hokage Tower in chains surrounded by several Anbu as the fourth Hokage walked behind him and turned to one of his assistants and said, "Call for an emergency council meeting, I want them here in an hour, he has a lot to answer for." "Yes sir, right away." Akima stated on the command deck of one of the newly built sky destroyers, as they become known as she gave the Empire of the chance to keep the peace more easily was also thanks to their alliance with the Land Spring. The ship even existed in the first place as it moved gracefully through the sky on its course towards the Hidden Leaf Village. One of the 9 shadows then walked up to her and motioned for her to follow him as he brought to a holographic image of Leaf Village showing a single point of interest in a rather large tower close to a rather unique looking mountain. The young trooper then pointed and said to her, "The tracking signal appears to be coming from this tower here. We want no more until we can scan it, but to do that we need to be closer to the village." "How close?" she asked. "Too close for my liking, my lady, but fortunately we will arrive at nighttime and there is a large amount of cloud cover. We will be undetected for time and the smaller ships will be able to use their new cloaking systems to get close to the tower without being detected." She nodded her head and then said, "I like this plan a lot. As soon as you can get an updated plan, give it to us. We need know the layout of this building as soon as possible and tell all who are going that we are to use stun only, no lethal force." The man nodded his head, bowed and said, "Sir, yes sir." Naruto found himself being taken from his holding cell by armed escort and realized exactly where he was going. He then felt the vibration from his bracelet and realized that his rescuers were on their way. All he had to do now was wait. Akima watched the 2 ships move into position. The main gunship used its new cloaking technology to stay hidden as it waited to find an opening to fire into the building to create an opportunity to save the Emperor. At the same time, they would also be working their way up to where he was taking down anyone who got in their way the time without the full lethal force. Strapped to her side were his favorite weapons that she knew would come in quite handy in the not-so-distant future. The doors to the primary council room opened, revealing not only the civilian but ninja council sitting down behind their tables, but what truly enraged and see his former friends who had betrayed him standing with their parents looking at him as if he was the villain here. Look at them judging me of all people. Well, if they want a villain, I guess I can play that role for time. The 4th Hokage sat behind the middle table with his wife and daughter correctly behind them, looking almost smug as he was walked into the room. At that moment the 4th decided to speak. "Naruto Uzumaki, former genin of the Hidden Leaf Village. You now stand before this council to answer the charges of desertion and disobeying direct orders that were handed to you by myself, your village leader. What do you have to say in your defense?" Naruto looked at them all over before he spoke. "I do not recognize this council's right to hold me against my will." The sounds of talking could be heard by everyone as they could not believe what he had just said. The 4th Hokage was slightly surprised by this choice of words and then spoke. "I am afraid we have every right to demand your return, as that was part of your banishment clauses we put in first place." Naruto then gave a cold smile as he then said to all of them, "Unfortunately, you have forgotten that all exiles and banishment have a right to remain in said exile or banishment if they believe that returning does not suit their interests or that it may threaten their lives, and I find that both of them apply here." Everyone in the room was surprised by this, began murmuring to each other even more than before. The 4th Hokage was surprised by this answer and decided to probe further. "You would be safe in the village. I can assure you that no harm will come to you." "You are a terrible liar, Lord 4th. Everyone here knows that because of what you've done, the Akatsuki will soon be coming after me because of what you have done to me in the past to see this rather pathetic village from its doom all those years ago." Akima and special attachment of shadow troopers made a week deeper into the Hokage Tower, hoping to not encounter any major resistance. Unfortunately, somebody's blood must have not been very good, as several Anbu appeared to try to engage them in the process only to receive stun bolts to the face. Akima could only let out a curse as she realized hoping to make it to the council room without being detected was no impossibility. "All right, screw it. Take down anyone who gets in your way, move." Everyone in the council room was shocked to hear sounds of strange weapons being fired outside of the main doors to the room they were currently in. The 4th turns to look at Naruto, who had a huge smile upon his face as the young man then spoke. "You think you're safe?" "I know that we are all safe," the 4th said. "It is an illusion. A comforting lie told to protect you. Enjoy these final moments of peace, Lord 4th Floor. I have returned things to you, and I will have my vengeance upon you what you took from me." The look of shock upon the 4th Hokage's face was almost priceless. "I took nothing from you. I am trying to help you." "No, you are not." After saying these words, he then held up his hands, and with the shock of everyone in the room, they simply unlocked and fell to the floor as she then entered a combat since they had never seen before, as the doors were literally blown off their hinges, revealing a large number of men in strange black armor and women who had rather unique looking as well, who threw him to strange-looking cylinders which he then caught without much problems at all, if any, inactivated and revealing look like sword blades made of light, one red one blue. Naruto then looked the fourth in his eyes and said, "So, shall we begin?" Right at this moment, the smaller ship that had dropped off the troopers allowing them to infiltrate our came into view, only for the strange warrior Swatch it literally be shot down thanks to a large toad hitting it, sending it flying into the building. The pilot was able to safely eject them, come crashing through one of the windows to safety, only to look at the potential battle that was about to erupt. Kushina could not believe her eyes that she was actually looking at a lightsaber being held by the one she had been waiting to see again. Now had a look of hate upon all of them and then realized partially why. She then reached out to the force and grabbed the blue blade away from its owner, surprising him the process as the two of them ran into an instant battle. The room was filled with the sounds of fighting between the two groups. The two people building the lightsabers proved to be equally matched and hardened thanks to wars they had been in which had honed much of their skills. The process, however, before anyone could do anything else, the building was rocked by a strong explosion from the downed craft which destroyed a good chunk of the tower in the process. At this point in time, the other gunship and moved into position and began firing into the room, hoping to give their comrades the cover they needed to escape. Most everyone else was running for cover, scared to death, even though rookies who had never experienced this kind of combat in their life and also remembered their former comrades' haunting words as he combated the fourth's wife, ultimately stretching his hand out, sending her flying back and hitting a wall hard, giving him and several of the troopers the time they needed to get aboard the gunship. The last person to leave was Akima herself. Unfortunately, she underestimated the red-headed woman who took a swipe at her head, cutting her helmet into pieces and forcing it to fall off her head. By this time the gunship was already high in the air as the rain from the clouds above began to fall hard on the village. The armored woman then took a hard run towards the edge and activated the jetpack and went flying high into the air. She turned around and began to fire her blasters at the woman with the blue lightsaber, hoping to keep her at bay so they could make a clean escape. Jiraiya came running into the council room and looked at the impressive amount of damage, always happy to see that at least no one had been killed. He then walked up to the student and said, "Now we have a problem with the Empire." Naruto and the Shadow Troopers assisted Akima on board the gunship. Naruto then noticed the lack of her headwear and commented upon it. "What the hell happened to you and where is your helmet?" She gave him one of those if looks could only kill glances and then spoke, "That crazy bitch who stole your lightsaber nearly cut my head off. Luckily she only got my helmet." He nodded to her and then walked up to the pilot and quickly gave an order. "Pilot, once we are on board the Sky Destroyer, inform the captain to break cover and set course for Volcano City, best possible speed." The pilot nodded and instantly began to relay his Emperor's orders as the small gunship broke through the clouds, revealing the E-51 class Sky Destroyer named the Vengeance. As soon as the gunship entered the docking area of the Vengeance, the mighty vessel began to move through the sky on its course to the capital of the Land of Fire. Minato could hardly believe what had occurred just a few minutes earlier as the wounded were carried out of the currently unstable Hokage Tower after the attack by the Empire of Balance's Shadow Troopers. Much to his own surprise, learned that no one had been seriously injured or killed. However, the tower would need massive repairs thanks to their attack. At the same time, he was having a hard time trying to come to grips with what his wayward son had said to them all, and realized part of this was due to his own action all those years ago and his own pride that got in the way. The other thing that had surprised him was his wife's hidden abilities, which were awfully similar to his son's. But before anything else could be said, he watched his former sensei walk up to him with a look that just said, "I told you so." He found it hard to look the older man in the eyes as he then spoke, "So do you want to hear that you were right?" Jiraiya could only let out a small laugh as he walked up alongside his student, then said, "Well, I was right, you know, but I get the distinct feeling that this is not over yet. If only I had gotten a chance to talk to him, I could have convinced him to come back home where he belongs." Jiraiya let out a sigh and shook his head and then said to his former student, "To be honest with you, Minato, this was really never his home thanks to what the villagers did to him at a young age. I mean, to be honest with you, he's got every right to not want to come back to this village at all." Minato then looked over to his wife to see her deep in thought holding the weapon that she had taken from their son in the conflict and realized that she knew far more than she was telling him. But before he could even start walking over to her, he heard a strange kind of sound coming from the sky, turned and looked up only to see the clouds parting to reveal something massive. The song from Tron Legacy Rectifier by Daft Punk begins playing in the background. You can go to YouTube to hear the song during this part of the story. Everyone in the village was now looking up at the sky in shock as the Vengeance moved through the sky, no longer trying to hide itself among the clouds that still hung over a good portion of the hidden leaf. Many of the villagers who were aware of what was taking place at the Hokage Tower were now in shock as they looked up at the devastatingly powerful and yet beautiful war machine that moved gracefully through the air without a care in the world as it made its way over the village. Jiraiya could not believe what he was seeing, as they had only been stories that had been told by people who had visited both the Empire and the Land of Spring. The Sky Destroyers were among the most powerful ships that the Empire had at his disposal in case of battles against its people. Minato and everyone in the room were at a loss for words as they never expected to see something like this flying through their skies. One of the Chunins that was currently in the room came back to his senses and realized what course the massive ship had set and paled, realizing what this could mean, and shouted out for all to hear, "That thing's headed for Volcano City." Everyone in the room, though their blood run cold with this realization. Jiraiya grabbed his student by the shoulders and said in a forceful tone, "Get your best Anbu together right now and get to the capital. Make sure that they don't kill our daimyo for what you have done here today." Minato came back to his senses and motioned for several of his men to follow him and watched as his wife did the same. His daughter was about to forcibly volunteer herself as well until he stopped her in her tracks. "No, you stay here with Jiraiya and the rest of the rookies just in case they come back or send another ship to invade the village. Do you understand me?" She nodded to her father as he walked out of the room with one of the Anbu asking him a question. "How are we supposed to stop that thing, sir?" For the first time in his life, Minato did not have an answer. He however felt that this was his fault in some way and he was going to do everything in his power to correct it and hopefully avoid a war in the process. "I honestly don't know any more, and that we have to get to the capital as soon as possible." Kushina was curious about something and asked her husband, "Why not just use your seals to get us there before they arrive?" "I couldn't take the chance that someone would use that same system to hurt our country's leaders, so I never installed them in the capital for security reasons, and the ones I didn't use were a one-way trip destroyed after they're used to prevent them from falling in the hands of our enemies. I am afraid to say we are going to have to go the long way, and when this is over you and I are going to have a long talk." The doors of the Vengeance's bridge opened, revealing the Emperor and Akima walking in with a purpose about them that everyone on the busy Sky Destroyer's bridge would notice without a single thought. The young captain turned to look at the Emperor as he walked home the bridge and motioned for the two women he had just been talking to just a moment ago to follow him as he gave a light bow before the man who had saved his country from disruption that was now part of the Empire. "My Emperor, we are currently en route to Volcano City as you requested. Should I prepare the troops and weapons for immediate deployment?" Capt. asked. "Keep them on standby, Captain. I want a complete scan once we are close enough to the capital, as I wish to have a face-to-face with their daimyo over this matter." The two women walked up to him after he was done to Capt. and looked ready for orders. The two sisters were in fact the current leaders of what was left of the Jedi and Sith clans of the Empire of Balance. Korra and her sister Mavis shared the same mother but different fathers, thinks of them being either Jedi or Sith. Korra was raised as a Jedi while her sister Mavis was raised by her Sith father. To the surprise of the young sisters, their parents got along quite well despite being on totally opposite sides of the Force. Each of the clans were actually struggling for peace and to protect what little they had, as many other governments wanted them to fight for their sides, killing many innocents in the process despite both of their beliefs. The two clans had engaged in battle from time to time but had always maintained a level of respect for each other that more often than not kept the peace between them, and had at sometimes even married each other, producing children who would decide which side of the Force they would be, or they would be much like the Emperor, a balanced user of Force for whom there was no light or dark side. Both of them remembered when the young man had come to their side of the world seeking to forget what had been done to him. Because of the darkness in his life, he had walked down the Sith path first. To everyone's surprise, though he became a rather powerful Force user in no time, easily gained the rank of Darth in no time at all, when one of the warlords who had kept the lands in constant war had decided to wipe out a small village that both the Jedi and Sith regularly visited, and found some measure of peace among its people were threatened by this man, the young Emperor, to be revealed just how powerful he really was, earning his full title of Darth Maelstrom that day. But the young man admitted that he would never stop learning, and also adopted the teachings of the Jedi some time later to give himself some measure of peace that had been sorely lacking in his life. With the help of many creatures that had come from the stars themselves along with the Jedi and Sith, he realized that the land would never truly know peace unless something was done about this constant state of war. The two sisters, their parents and clans, had pledged themselves to assist him in ending this war once and for all and to bring about a true era of peace. That was more than 10 years ago when he had started his crusade, and 12 years since he had been banished from the village they now flew over. Mavis secretly wanted to use many of the cannons on board the Vengeance to teach these people some manners, as she would call it, but did not, knowing that there were still many innocents that had actually tried to help him, still inhabiting this pathetic excuse for a village. The two girls had also fallen madly in love with the Emperor, as well as their Mandalorian friend Akima, who also wished to restore her clan as well. Much to the Emperor's dismay, he was told by his council that many heirs will be required to keep the Empire strong in the future, and that he would require many wives. The first woman to truly capture his heart, and also at this time to carry one of his progeny, was the current daimyo of the Land of Spring, which was officially an ally to the Empire but unofficially was now a part of it under sovereignty rules like several other territories in the Empire as well. Korra could sense the dark thoughts from her sister and let out a sigh, knowing that some of them involved doing naughty things with their future husband right at this moment, but decided to instead inquire about their current course. Why are we even bothering to pay this man a visit, my lord? He turned to her and said, I want to look in his eyes and see if he is lying to me when I ask him if he knew what his fire shadow was doing. Plus Korra, I want to make an impression that they should not mess with the Empire. We fought for this peace long enough, do not want to lose any more friends, or my potential family. The three women nodded their heads, realizing that he was right, as they have all lost people and family to the tyranny of others. Naruto looked over the holographic image of the capital city of the Land of Fire known as Volcano City with a critical eye, looking for anything that he could use. As the vengeance got closer and closer, the scams got more detailed about the capital city, which gave him a better idea of what to do when they arrived. The young captain also stared at the holographic image and pointed to a rather large complex using his many years of experience and determined their next course of action. If I am right, sir, this would be the daimyo's residence here and probably also acts as the government building for the whole city and country as well. This large part appears to be the main housing area for the daimyo, I believe. Naruto nodded his head as one of the shadow troopers brought over an old map of the fire daimyo's mansion and placed it near the holographic image so that everyone on the bridge could compare them. The trooper then spoke. This appears to be the main receiving hall where the fire daimyo greets his foreign dignitaries, and if this old design is still somewhat accurate, his main living quarters and offices are located directly behind this area. Everyone standing around the holographic monitor studied both the plans and the image in great detail, especially as they got closer and more of the home holographic became more detailed. Akima, however, was still frustrated that they had to get so close in order to use scanners in any great detail. I can't believe that the scanners can't give us any more details any sooner, and we have to keep getting closer and closer to a potential enemy. The captain understood her feelings and decided to give at least some good news. I understand your concerns, Lady Akima, but we have the most advanced sensors in the fleet and the new prototypes are still in development at this time. However, the Vengeance is equipped with the best, and judging by the readings we are receiving, we will arrive in about 15 minutes. However, we will have more detailed scans of the entire area, especially the mansion, in about 5 minutes time. Naruto had to admit that he was impressed that the new sensors were that powerful and accurate. He also studied the holographic image and the plans before him and looked at the mansion and had a sudden idea. He had a wonderful, awful idea. Everyone around him instantly knew that look and had a sudden shiver of fear ran up their spines as he then said, prepare the snipers and shadow troopers for immediate action the moment we arrived, and I want you two there as well, and that goes double for you, Akima. The captain became curious, knowing that some of the Emperor's plans had at times been known as overkill to many, and he blamed it partially on the fact that the young leader had once been a prankster and decided to ask a much needed question. If I might be so bold, sir, what exactly were you planning to do? Naruto turned to the young captain and gave a wicked smile as he then pointed at a small part of the holographic image and then spoke. You see this small balcony area? Yes, sir, I do. Well, we are going to drive right up to it and say hello, but we are going to do it my way. XX the fire daimyo sat behind his desk doing the one thing that every man of power seemed to dread doing, the paperwork. As he continued to read report after report or to either approve or deny things put before him, he began to secretly wish for something, anything to distract him from this current activity. Well, it be said that the universe and the force sometimes give you exactly what you want, even if it's over the top. That moment one of his assistants came running in and carried a single piece of paper with the look of dread about him. My, what has you in such a state? Firelord asked. The young assistant handed the fire daimyo the report to read. The surprise upon his face was hard to miss as he read about the sudden attack upon the Leaf Village by none other than the Empire of Balance. Is this accurate? Yes, sir, but we have yet to receive any more from our contact in the village. It would appear that they were quite desperate to get Mr. Uzumaki back, the young assistant said. The daimyo also nodded his head at this, then said, for what little we have in this report, many would consider it overkill. I mean, they couldn't have bothered to try to negotiate for his release. I mean, it's not like the Hokage kidnapped the emperor or something. Right at that moment they began to hear a rumbling like sound and many voices screaming out in shock. The fire daimyo then proceeded to get up from behind his desk and make a long run to the balcony at the main audience hall only to see what was going on. He had to admit while the hall was rather large and could accommodate a great many people both for meeting foreign dignitaries and hosting great events for both the wealthy and the common man, he had to admit the room was just too damn big and felt winded just crossing the distance to the balcony itself. Upon reaching the balcony he was greeted with a rather unique spectacle of seeing what looked to be a sky destroyer of the Empire of Balance moving through the air of the capital with not a care in the world. However, upon closer examination he realized that the large ship seemed to be coming right at the balcony itself and was not reducing speed at all. Although he was not experienced in any form of combat, he did decide to make a run for it, realizing that the ship had every intention of ramming right into his home, and shouted for all to hear, everyone run right now, it's coming right for us. Everyone in the room immediately began to run from the servants to the ninja and samurai, knowing that this was their only shot to stay alive as the ship continued to come at them on its insane collision course. Once they were halfway across the Great Hall, the impact of the Sky Destroyer was both heard and felt as the sound of crumbling stone and mortar came crashing down as the ship continued to plow through the room, not caring for any in its way. One of the many statues, and was nearly 3 stories tall, was also grand and destroyed, hitting the ground hard and bouncing off the ship's metal hull as it continued to enter the large room, only stopping a few feet from the fire daimyo's throat itself. By this time the room was beginning to fill with Fire Country samurai ready to defend their leader, who was hiding behind his throne in total shock at what had just occurred, realizing that the Empire must have been quite angered by what the 4th Hokage had done. In several of the upper areas of the room that were defensive balconies for the samurai warriors who were trained in archery and had their arrows ready to bear in case they were needed, part of the ship seemed to open, revealing a dark interior with no lights present. The archers became even more concerned and hold back, ready to fire at a moment's notice. However, before they could even let their arrows fly, they were instead hit by a stun laser shot from a sniper blaster, falling harmlessly to the ground, unconscious but alive. Everyone in the room was even more shocked by this, as a large number of shadow troopers exited the ship with their weapons ready for combat at a moment's notice, leading them with the current leaders of the Jedi and Sith clans. Korra immediately activated her blue lightsaber, keeping it ready for any kind of threats, as her sister Mavis activated her red double-bladed lightsaber and was just itching to show these people what she could do. Akima walked down the ramp with a new helmet upon her head and a blaster in one hand and the specially made black lightsaber that had been given to her clan in the other. However, it was the form of one Naruto Uzumaki walking into the room that sent a level of fear up in everyone present, as he seemed to have an air of superiority about him and looked that he meant business. Out of the 3 remaining ninjas who were present in the room and also recognized him instantly, one of them decided to his leader's orders and also felt a bit superior to him and was always going on about fate. Neji was wishing to complete the orders that have been given to him and his team and made an immediate decision to capture the target before him, ignoring the odds against them, believing that they would win. Naruto Uzumaki, by order of the 4th Hokage, you are to surrender and accompany us back to the Hidden Leaf Village, where you will Naruto gave Neji a rather cruel smile as he used the force to not only to choke him but also moved him into the air, as he then gave his orders: if any of the fire samurai even move any of their muscles in the wrong way, take them down but do not kill them. Am I understood? All throughout the room the troopers could be heard shouting out their compliance with the orders. Naruto then said, but leave them for me, I need to beat something up anyways. Both Neji and his team, as well as many of the samurais, could not handle the stalemate and made their moves running at the troopers and their current target. Before they even got 5 feet, the troopers they had opened fire, stunning all of them into the ground. Neji, on the other hand, could not use any of his attentional abilities or his perfect defense, and his improved skills weren't not assisting him as he tried to release himself from this strange situation. Naruto continued to toy with his opponent for a bit longer but sensed through the force that he was simply following orders. The young emperor then decided to use his force abilities that were at this time in a chokehold and had him in the air and then repeatedly slamming him into object after object until finally hit the ground so hard that bones could be heard breaking from the impact. The young Mon's 2 teammates then decided to engage the emperor in combat with looks of shock upon their faces, only to receive a similar treatment. The young girl was down but not unconscious. However, the young man, wearing a strange green outfit, and then attempted to attack the emperor, only to be sent flying into and through a nearby support column. However, he was not done, as he then shot out some force lightning, incapacitating his opponent completely without killing him in the process. As soon as this was done, he then walked up and with a wave of his hand sent the throne flying into a wall, revealing the frightened fire daimyo. The fire daimyo managed to regain some of his courage as he brought himself to his full height and then looked the young man right in the eyes. Do you have any idea what you have done, young man? What have I done? Oh, that's right, I basically drove my big-ass Sky Destroyer into your home just to make a point about screwing around with the Empire and its people. The Fire Lord still felt as if he was somewhat still in control. You are not part of the Empire, boy. You were part of this country's ninja forces and still under my command and that of the 4th Hokage. The Fire Lord could not finish his statement as he felt a pressure around his throat and found himself being lifted in the air. He noticed that Naruto had his left hand extended up in the air in a clinching motion and looking right at the leader with a look of total hatred and disgust upon it. I am no longer part of this country and I no longer answer to that man either. With this said so that all could hear it, he then released the old man from his grip and put him on the ground gently, as he then walked up to the Fire Lord and then said, the day I was banished I made the decision to forever remain in my banishment, as I have no reason to return to this land whatsoever. Then why are you here doing this? The Fire Lord asked of him. That's simple. I want you to know just who your Hokage kidnapped and if you knew anything about it. The daimyo nodded his head and realized that there was no point in line since he had given no kinds of authorization for this kind of operation and realized just how dangerous it was to mess with the Empire after what he had just seen. I know nothing about what he has planned for you and have only just learned about your apprehension a few moments before you basically ran to ship into my home. Naruto nodded his head knowing that the Fire Lord was telling the truth, even spoke to the frightened leader hoping to get what was happening over with. Just for your information, I am the Emperor of the Empire of Balance, and if your Hokage had your blessing in trying to kidnap me, this would have been a declaration of war between our nations. We are not so easy to beat, boy. You had surprise on your side, but it won't happen again. Naruto then pulled a small piece of metal off of his belt and activated it, showing a holographic image of the captain, who immediately came to attention. My lord, what are your commands? Fire the main battery upon the assigned target at only 5% power. Yes, sir. Prepared to fire. The fire daimyo became concerned as Naruto pointed out the side one of the walls that was no longer there to a small building still under construction. Everyone in the room watched as the Vengeance's main battery opened fire, destroying the building in the process. Remember, that was only 5% of this ship's overall firepower, and don't worry, we made sure no one would die. I am not a monster, but you should know that every single person in my military has had more than 5 years of total war experience in comparison to both your samurai and ninja, so do not test me, because if you do threaten either me or anyone I care about ever again, I and the Empire will not hesitate to walk over all of your cold corpses to retrieve them. Now do I make myself clear? The fire daimyo could only nod his head in understanding as Naruto then said, good, now the chest that is coming out of my ship will pay for the damages to your home, I hope, and we will negotiate a peace treaty at a mutual location like the Land of Iron in 2 weeks' time, or would you prefer we just go to war? No, your terms are quite acceptable, there is so much to tell you. At the moment I don't want to hear it. With that said, he and the rest of his troops boarded the Sky Destroyer as to chest were left with enough money to easily rebuild the house of the fire daimyo without any problems whatsoever. Everyone in the room then heard the sounds of rumbling once more as the ship literally pulled out of the fire mansion and set course towards home. The Leaf Ninja team that had been put together was so more than 20 minutes from the capital when they saw the Sky Destroyer leaving, realized they might already be too late but had to push on, knowing that they had to know if they were at war. Naruto now stood before the desk of the 4th Hokage, wondering what was to befall him now after the failure to retrieve his former teammate who had decided to go rogue and had left him for dead in the process. Even as he stood before the village leader, he was covered in nothing but bandages. Directly behind the Hokage stood his wife and daughter, who had been hidden for some time now and was being treated like the princess of Konoha, who could do no wrong in the villagers' eyes. Despite all of this, he had still some hope that everything would work out in the end. But the minute the Hokage opened his mouth, he knew it was not to be. Do you know how much trouble you are in at this moment, Naruto? Naruto was still trying to come to grips with what his former hero was saying to him. What kind of trouble? Your mission was to bring back your teammate. You failed that mission and allowed him to end up in our enemy's hands. Naruto already knew this and felt a great deal of discomfort, not only from his wounds but also his emotions over what had happened at the Valley of the End. He just knew that his bad day was just going to get a lot worse. It is the decision of not only myself but also the council that you be banished from not only the village but the Land of Fire for no more than 2.5 years. You will be required to return to the village after that time and resume your duties as one of my soldiers, the 4th Hokage said to him. Naruto was absolutely infuriated at what his one-time hero had just said to him. However, his dark mood was made even worse when the young girl decided to speak. I always knew you were a screw-up. You couldn't even do one simple retrieval mission. That's enough, Kai. Yes, father. The 4th then turned back to the young boy and spoke once again, trying to convey some sympathy but also to get his point across. This is your only way to keep your dream alive, Naruto. You will meet up with Jiraiya and continue your training under him so you can learn to control your tenant. Naruto nodded his head and left the room with a sense of betrayal, as he had grown to not trust the 4th Hokage one bit, as he would say one thing and then do quite the another. He merely nodded his head and left the room with a clear objective of his own. Freedom. The present. Naruto opened his eyes after reliving that small memory from that day he had been banished. He had relived the memory to simply remind himself of what had been done to him and felt no sympathy for the hidden leaf. Mavis and then walked up to him as he turned to her and said, when we arrived at the capital here, the shadow troopers ready for departure within 1 week's time. I want them there when the Land of Fire and the Hidden Leaf Ninja arrives. I want to make an impression. What kind of impression? She asked him. He gave her a warm smile as he then said, the kind that tells them not to mess with us ever again, and have the Night Sisters ready for deployment as well. It will be done, my lord. She then gave him a slight bow as he walked away and could not help but think about what was going to happen to them from this point on. I hope we don't go back to war, damn tree huggers. The fourth Hokage, his wife, and the team of leaf ninjas entered into the palace main audience chamber and were shocked at the level of damage before them. It was clear that Naruto no longer viewed the Land of Fire as his homeland and was willing to go to some extremes to show it. Off in a corner, the three ninjas he had assigned to protect the Fire Lord were currently being tended to by several medics, and it was clear that they had come face to face with his son. He often wondered what had driven his son to such acts and began to realize maybe he never knew his boy at all, especially when he made that decision. Right at this moment, the Fire Lord himself stepped up behind them and cleared his throat. The small team of ninjas turned around to look at him to see the look of pure fury upon his face. Minato could not help but feel the fury of his lord as the man looked him in the eyes and then spoke in a very controlled manner. Despite the fury, it was clearly evident in his posture. Perhaps you would like to enlighten me why you authorized a retrieval mission for your son when he was in the presence of the Empire of Balance. We have been looking for him for some time, my lord. Master Jiraiya informed me of his whereabouts thanks to his spy network. Based on this information, we decided to perform a capture, but were unaware of just how important he was to the Empire. The fourth said, hoping that his answer was satisfactory and also wondering just how severe the situation really was. The Fire Lord could not believe what he was hearing and then spoke. And it did not occur to you that the Empire might take his abduction personally? We were hoping to simply take him into custody, and if the Empire did demand some kind of tribute, we could simply negotiate for it. I seriously doubt the Emperor is indebted to my son, and he would not be missed, my lord. The fourth said. However, it was look upon the Fire Lord's face that surprised him. The Fire Lord simply could not believe what he was hearing. Then I would say you have amazingly failed. This surprised all of the assembled hidden leaf ninja as he then spoke, this time trying to get his point across. Let me give you a rundown of what he did here because of you and your actions. First off, he drove that big ass ship right into my meaning audience hall and almost into my living quarters just to get my attention, if you will. They were all surprised by this as the daimyo continued. Then this room fills with my personal guard and my elite archers, only for the ship to open up and strange bits of light come flying out and knock everyone unconscious that they touched. Then your boy and what looked like you lead soldiers wearing jet black armor with strange weapons, I might add, and two women with swords made of light, and this woman in really heavy duty looking armor come walking out of the ship as if he owned the place. Everyone could make out his level of concern as he then walked over and pointed at the three down and ninja. Then these three and a few more guards come in to defend me, only for him to suddenly move his hand, sending them flying into wall after wall, back and forth, back and forth. Kushina was shocked by what she was hearing, as she had only heard old rumors about the lost lands which had become the Empire and of the Sith and Jedi that still lived there. She still found everything quite hard to believe and realized she was going to have one hell of a talk later with her husband about everything. The Fire Lord then continued to speak as he pointed to a corner where his chair was sitting almost embedded in the wall. Then after he's done with them, he then moves his hand and sends my chair flying into wall over there, and let me tell you, he looked really pissed off. Then I tried to intimidate him and the Empire into not going to war with us, only for him to then choke me with his hand, and he wasn't even touching me and I was off the ground. He then proceeded to tell me, and you're going to love this one. That caught everyone by surprise, wondering what little revelation the Fire Lord had for them, as he then continued. He then revealed to me that he was in fact is the Emperor. So you did piss them off, and just to make his point a little more clear, he then had that the ship blow up a nearby building with only 5% of that thing's overall power, and then proceeded to inform me that if we screw with him that he will not hesitate to walk over our cold dead corpses, and that his soldiers have more war experience than any of your ninja do at this time, or my samurai for that matter. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the Fire Lord wished he had a camera at that very moment so he could take a picture of their shocked faces after what he just told them. The fourth and his wife looked at each other, realizing that their problems had just gotten worse. And of course the Fire Lord still wasn't done with them yet, and it's not over yet. To avoid a war breaking out, made the suggestion that in 2 weeks' time we will meet at the Land of Iron to negotiate a peace treaty, and considering what you did, Minato, it's going to be one hell of a talk. So don't be surprised if I throw your resurrected ass under the bus to save not only my country but my people, considering you're the cause of all of this. Minato on one hand could not blame his lord for this statement, however it was look upon his wife's face and her statement that caught everyone by surprise. I can't believe he hates us that much to fall to the dark side. Everyone was looking at her now with curiosity. The fourth then asked, what you talking about? She looked him in the eyes, realizing she had to explain something she hadn't tried to think about for so long. Long ago, several ancestors of my clan lived in what would become the Empire. They were members of a religious-like group known as Jedi. The Jedi believe that there is the mystical energy that surrounds all living things called the Force. The fourth Hokage could hardly believe what he was hearing, but put 2 and 2 together with what he had seen with his own eyes. So this force is what you and him used in your battle and with what he did in this room. She nodded her head and then continued, yes, that is correct. Jedi used the light side of the Force, but their opposites, their native, used the dark side. They were known as the Sith. The Fire Lord was curious by this statement but could also make an assumption. I take it by your tone that the Sith used the dark side of Force and that this was something to be afraid of? Again she nodded her head and continued to speak. The dark side is very powerful in its own right and is the quick and easy path, however it has a will of its own and is very dangerous. You have to understand the Sith were talked about like a plague and were very dangerous, capable of almost anything. So you're saying we need to be very concerned? Of the other ninjas asked her. Yes we do. My lord, you said there were 2 girls with him that had swords made of light. What colors when they? Kushina asked him. One girl had a blue sword, but the other one had a twin-bladed red one, the daimyo answered. Everyone could see the look of unease upon her face as she continued to speak. I was afraid of this. That girl with the red one was a Sith warrior, maybe a lord, and is very dangerous. The other girl wasn't directly Jedi Heart of the Order that my ancestors fled from. What do you mean fled? The fourth asked, not liking the answer but needing to know. Some of the Jedi became trapped on this world along with some Sith. The 2 decided to work together to survive, but my ancestors refused to work with the Sith and fled to what is my ancestral homeland. Before I was sent to the Leaf I only had so much training in the ways of the Jedi, was told keep my abilities secret from my master. However, I never thought any of the Sith had survived thanks to all the wars taking place in what would be the Empire, she said to them. Minato was surprised by this bit of knowledge. So you used what you knew, try to stop him. If he becomes a threat to this country, can you stop him? She simply nodded her head in a no as she spoke. Only a fully trained Jedi can stop him if he is a true Sith, and the only other Jedi will probably be on his side as well. The Fire Lord had a feeling things were only going to get more complicated. Well, that has made my mind up, Lady Fourth, you'll be coming with us. We will leave for the Land of Iron in 1 week's time. The Fire Lord then proceeded to walk back to his quarters as the Leaf Ninja realized they had much to do. In the Hidden Leaf Village, a certain old war hawk known as Danzo was beginning to wonder what would happen to the village he was trying to protect because of the actions of its current leader. On one hand he could respect the Emperor and the message he had sent, but on the other it infuriated him to no end. The other 2 council elders who had also been against the 4th Hokage's initial plan were all so greatly distressed by the current outcome. We should remove him from the position of Hokage at once. Danzo on the other hand knew that they were in a delicate situation. That would not be possible unless we risk looking weak in front of our enemies. There are very few capable candidates for the position of Hokage and none of them have any war experience, which is, I hate to say it, is looming. This surprised the other elders greatly. You are so adamant about trying to stop him and his plan. As I recall, you said taking away the weapon that kept the balance was a bad idea. The old war hawk simply nodded his head, and I was right in a way, even if those were my personal views, but there was another reason as well. And that would be? The female asked. Keeping a promise to an old friend. Something I might add neither of you have even tried to do, the old war hawks said, noticing the look of hatred upon their faces. Do not bring the Lord Third into this, the male said with a sense of anger. I was closer to him than you will ever be, and I respect that boy despite the fact I am a little intimidated by him. I may be a creature of war, but I've always hoped for peace, Danzo said to them, seeing a look of genuine surprise upon their faces. Then let us all pray that peace continues despite what the 4th has done, the female elder said, only to see a look of dismay upon the war hawk's face. I believe that window has long since passed. There was a darkness coming and we all know it will be with red clouds that we should have eliminated long ago. In a large room somewhere in the Land of Rain, the organization known as Akatsuki was finally meeting once more. For years they had been looking for only one particular container before they could even attempt to advance their plans, and now he was back. Those, however, one huge problem. Never once had one other containers been so far away or so powerful, his own personal army. The leader, only known as Pain, then began to speak. The Nine Tails has resurfaced at last, however it is a rather complicated issue. One of the members looked almost more like a girl, could not help but comment on the situation. Just let me go and capture this host. It won't be a complicated issue for very long. Once me and my partner done with it, it'll be an artful blast. Perhaps you would like to know what the complicated issue is before you go to your death. Or would you rather I just kill you right here and now? The leader said, noticing the look of concern upon everyone's face, as he was usually never this direct with his threats. The only female the group turned and spoke. The complicated issue is that he's now the Emperor of the Empire of Balance, and as you know that area is extremely dangerous for us to even attempt to enter. This surprised everyone in the room greatly as they heard stories of the Empire. Great, he just had to make it more difficult. It looks like I won't be getting a bounty out of this one. You and your damn bounties. I want to sacrifice this emperor to my god, after we remove the Nine Tails, of course, said a particularly murderous priest. The leader could not help but roll his eyes at their antics. As it stands, there is no place in the elemental nations that the empire has a strong connection with that we know of. However, there is one land we can get to with ease that does have a strong connection with him, Everyone began to smile, realizing that the land of spring was about to become their main target. Thanks for watching.